A moment comes in every life when the quiet truth rises above the noise, and you begin to see what was once hidden behind the curtain of pain. Not through revenge, not through anger, but through a clarity that only suffering can create. You start to realize that every act someone used to harm you was borrowed confidence, borrowed pride, borrowed power. None of it belonged to them. They carried those weapons like they were eternal. Yet you could almost feel the tremble in their hands as they used them. People rarely destroy others from a place of strength. They destroy from fear, disguised as authority. And now that fear is finally catching up to them. There is a strange justice woven quietly into the fabric of life. Nothing built on cruelty stands for long. What they used to break you becomes the very thing that breaks them. You may not see it immediately, but life has its own way of peeling away false layers. The arrogance they wore like armor begins to rust. The manipulation they believed was clever begins to tangle around their own feet. The lies they spread return like echoes that grow louder each time they try to silence them. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, everything they once used to wound you starts to slip from their grasp. Not because you wished them harm, not because you sought vengeance, but because what was never rooted in truth cannot survive a lifetime. You walked away believing you were the one who lost. You mourned the trust, the time, the innocence. You wondered why your heart had to be the battlefield. But now you're beginning to see that the real loss was never yours. The real loss belongs to the one who harmed you. For when a person attacks a pure soul, they forfeit the very things they thought made them powerful. They lose respect, they lose peace, they lose the illusion of control they clung to so tightly. And the strange thing about loss is that it exposes a person's true condition. Empty, fragile, hollow. Life is taking from them everything they once weaponized. The relationships they manipulated are crumbling. The confidence they faked is cracking. The stories they crafted are unraveling at the seams. What they threw at you returns to them with a weight they cannot bear, because the heart they wounded was capable of healing, but theirs never was. And while they struggle in the ruins of their own making, something extraordinary happens to you. You rise, not in triumph over them, but in liberation from them. You no longer carry their cruelty like a scarlet mark. You carry it like a certificate of survival. You begin to understand that your suffering was not proof of your weakness, but of your depth. That the pain they gave you became the soil where your resilience took root. Someone is losing everything they once used to hurt you, not because life is cruel, but because truth has a way of reclaiming what was misused. And when the dust settles, you'll see that the one who walked away with the quiet heart walked away with everything that matters. A person rarely wounds another from a place of genuine strength. Real strength is quiet, steady, and deeply rooted. It does not need to harm, belittle, or dominate. When someone chooses to hurt you, they are not operating from an abundance of power. They are operating from a deficit. The cruelty they used was never their own. It was borrowed, pieced together from pride, insecurity, false confidence, and the approval of others. They wore it like a mask, because without it, they feared being seen for what they truly were, fragile, uncertain, and deeply afraid of their own inadequacy. When someone attacks you, it often feels like they stand taller, speak louder, and carry more authority than you. But the truth is that everything they project is a performance, not a reality. They act as if they are powerful because they desperately need to believe they are. They use harsh words, manipulation, or intimidation, not because they are filled with might, but because their soul is hollow and shaking. Their aggression is nothing more than a trembling hand disguised as a clenched fist. Borrowed strength always has an expiration date. It looks impressive for a moment, but it cannot survive long term because it lacks an anchor. It comes from social validation, temporary superiority, or an inflated ego. Anything borrowed must eventually be returned. The confidence they displayed was not earned through inner character. It was stitched together from external sources, perhaps the influence of others, the advantage of a position, or the impression that you would never stand up for yourself. Once those sources fade, their behavior collapses. What seemed like dominance slowly withers into the truth, a frightened person masquerading as a powerful one. You might have thought they hurt you because they were stronger. You might have blamed yourself, believing that you were too soft, too trusting, or too gentle. But gentleness is not weakness. Purity is not fragility. These are strengths that do not roar, they endure. And the one who hurt you knew this on some level. They sensed a light in you that they did not possess, a calmness they could not understand, a sincerity they could not imitate. Their cruelty was an attempt to steal your glow, to shake your foundation, to dim what they could not duplicate. What they used against you, mockery, dismissiveness, manipulation, were tools they picked up because they had no real tools of character. Their only way to feel tall was to stand on the pieces of someone else. That is not power, it is dependency on another person's pain. And dependency is always unstable. A person who relies on hurting others to feel strong has already declared their weakness. They depend on darkness because they cannot generate any light within themselves. Think of borrowed strength like a costume worn in a play. Under the bright stage lights it looks regal and impressive, but once the performance ends and the lights dim, the costume is returned to the rack and the actor stands there as they truly are, ordinary, vulnerable, exposed. The one who hurt you was performing power, not living it. The moment life dimmed the lights on their stage, the illusion fell apart. And this is why everything they used to hurt you eventually slips from their grasp. Fake power cannot sustain itself. Lies demand more lies to survive. Arrogance requires constant applause. Manipulation needs willing participants. When those conditions are no longer present, their whole system collapses. You begin to see that the person who terrified you, belittled you, or tried to control you was standing on sand, not stone. Meanwhile, your strength, real strength, was quietly forming beneath the surface. You endured. You survived. You did not crumble, even when you felt broken. That is strength that cannot be borrowed or faked. True strength grows through pain, through reflection, through healing. It comes from within and does not depend on dominating anyone else. The one who hurt you mistook your silence for weakness, your patience for fear, your kindness for vulnerability. What they failed to understand is that these qualities are the marks of someone who does not need to crush others to feel whole. They did not recognize that the heart they tried to wound was stronger than any mask they wore. And now, life is revealing the difference. Their borrowed strength is fading, while your authentic strength is rising. They acted from a false sense of superiority because they had nothing real to hold on to. And when a person builds their identity on what is borrowed, life eventually demands its return. When that happens, you will see with undeniable clarity that the power they used against you was never theirs, and the strength you gained through endurance was always yours. Cruelty has a peculiar nature. It can roar loudly for a while, but it cannot endure. Anything built on the suffering of another will eventually crack under its own weight. When someone harms you, they often believe their actions will echo endlessly. They think their superiority will stand tall, their lies will live long, and their manipulation will stay intact. But life has its own quiet laws, and one of them is unshakable. Nothing constructed on cruelty remains standing forever. It may flourish for a season, but it always collapses in the end. A person who uses cruelty believes they have found a shortcut to power. They push, they belittle, they deceive, thinking they are building an empire of control. For a while, it even appears as if they are winning. They walk with exaggerated confidence, speak with a false authority, and act as though the world bends in their direction. They mistake temporary success for lasting security. But what they don't understand is that cruelty is a structure without foundation. It can rise quickly, but it cannot remain. It is a tower built out of sand, impressive only until the first strong wind blows. Cruelty is always in a hurry because it knows it is dying. It must shout because silence exposes it. It must keep moving because stillness reveals the emptiness underneath. It must hurt others because it cannot generate anything meaningful within itself. And so, those who harm others live in a frantic state of maintaining a lie. Every act of cruelty is another brick placed on unstable ground. They are not building strength, they are building collapse. But when cruelty is used against a heart like yours, a heart that feels deeply, trusts honestly, and loves sincerely, the collapse becomes inevitable. Not because you wished for it, but because cruelty cannot coexist with truth for long. Your existence becomes a mirror that exposes their falsehood. Your resilience becomes a quiet rebuke to their arrogance. Your healing becomes the sign that their power was temporary, while your worth was eternal. You may not see the cracks forming in their world at first. Cruelty is clever at hiding its decay. It dresses itself in laughter, in pride, in loud opinions, in forceful actions. But beneath all of that, something begins to tremble. Their relationships grow fragile because false power isolates rather than connects. Their confidence becomes shaky because it was built on the destruction of others rather than the strengthening of themselves. Their identity begins to crumble because it was rooted in pretending rather than being. Nothing built on cruelty can stand because cruelty is exhausting. It drains the one who uses it long before it injures the one it is aimed at. A person cannot feed on bitterness without becoming empty. They cannot build a life on hurting others without eventually creating a prison for themselves. And while it may take time, the collapse always comes. Slowly, quietly, and often in the very areas where they once boasted the most. The lies they told about you begin to lose their power as truth emerges in unexpected ways. The confidence they flaunted begins to look fragile as life removes the applause they depended on. The control they exerted begins to loosen as their tactics lose effectiveness. Their social mask begins to slip, and people start seeing the fear they once hid behind intimidation. Cruelty ages a person faster than time ever could. It wears down the spirit, corrodes the conscience, and gnaws at the peace they never really had. Meanwhile, you are not collapsing. You were wounded, yes. You were shaken, yes. But your foundation was never built on hurting others. Your heart, even when broken, carried truth. And truth has a way of restoring what cruelty attempts to destroy. As you heal, you rise. As you rise, you become proof that cruelty cannot win. Your survival becomes the quiet judgment of their actions. Your growth becomes the evidence of their downfall. Nothing built on cruelty survives because cruelty cannot produce life. It only destroys, and in that destruction, it consumes the one who uses it. So while they may have believed they were breaking you, they were only weakening the structure of their own world. And now, everything they built through harm stands on the brink of falling apart. Not because you failed, but because cruelty always fails in the end. Every weapon someone uses against you eventually finds its way back into their own life. Not through vengeance, not through your effort, but through the simple truth that harm cannot travel in one direction forever. It circles, it returns, it completes its journey by confronting the one who sent it out. When someone lies about you, the lie becomes a prison for them. When they manipulate you, manipulation becomes the language they are forced to live with. When they use arrogance to belittle you, arrogance becomes the wall that isolates them. Life has a way of allowing people to taste what they once served, not as punishment, but as revelation. A person may believe that their cleverness gives them immunity. They think their schemes are invisible, their strategies flawless, their ability to deceive unmatched. For a while they may even feel untouchable, as if they have mastered the art of controlling outcomes. They throw their weapons freely, slander, betrayal, humiliation, certain that the consequences will fall only on you. But what they fail to comprehend is that every harmful action they release is tied to a thread that leads straight back to their own heart. Eventually that thread snaps back with a force they cannot escape. This is why manipulation becomes a trap. The moment a person chooses deceit, they must maintain it. Lies demand more lies. Pretending requires constant effort. Control requires constant surveillance. The energy they once used to hurt you becomes the energy they must now spend protecting themselves from the collapse of their own deception. And it is tiring, it is suffocating, it drains them because no one can outrun the truth forever. The very tools they use to wound you are now the chains wrapped around their own ankles. Arrogance works the same way. They used it to belittle you, thinking it made them appear superior. They mistook your humility for inferiority, your patience for weakness, your silence for defeat. They believed they stood on higher ground when in reality they were standing on a cliff that was slowly eroding beneath their feet. Arrogance blinds a person to their own danger. It convinces them that they will never slip, never stumble, never fall. But arrogance is unstable. It has no humility to balance it, no wisdom to guide it, no truth to support it. Eventually the ground gives way, and the fall becomes unavoidable. The lies they spoke about you begin to haunt them in ways you may never witness. They start to question who believes them. They start to worry about who knows the truth. They become paranoid about being exposed. They try to control the narrative, but the harder they grip it, the faster it slips through their fingers. Lies are living things. They grow, twist, and mutate until even the one who created them cannot contain them. And when they spread too far, they turn on the one who birthed them. What was once a weapon becomes a wildfire. Even the emotional wounds they inflicted return in ways they never expected. When they ignored your pain, life sends them people who ignore theirs. When they dismissed your worth, life surrounds them with those who diminish theirs. When they treated your heart carelessly, they encounter hearts that treat them with the same disregard. It is not karma in the mystical sense. It is simply the natural consequence of sowing what one refuses to reap. No one escapes the harvest of their own behavior. What makes this return so powerful is that it rarely comes from the same source. It does not come from you. In fact, your hands remain clean. Your conscience remains clear. You walk away. You heal. You grow. And life continues shaping you into someone stronger and wiser. Meanwhile, the one who harmed you faces a storm made entirely of their own choices. They may hide it behind laughter or confidence, but inside their world begins to unravel the very qualities they used against you. Cruelty, manipulation, pride become the very things that suffocate their peace. In the end, they are forced to live with the reality they created. The weapons they once wielded so easily become burdens they cannot put down. What they used to hurt you becomes the mirror reflecting the truth they tried so hard to avoid. And as they struggle beneath the weight of what they unleashed, one thing becomes unmistakably clear. The harm they crafted for you has returned home, demanding to be acknowledged, understood, and carried by the one who made it. The moment someone hurts you, it is easy to believe that you are the one who has lost something precious. You feel the weight of betrayal, the sting of humiliation, the ache of being misunderstood or mistreated. You replay their words, their actions, their coldness, wondering what you could have done differently. Pain convinces you that you are on the losing side, that your heart has been emptied, your trust shattered, your dignity stolen. But with time, clarity takes the place of confusion, and you begin to see the truth hiding beneath the hurt. The real loss was never yours. It always belonged to the one who chose cruelty over kindness, deception over honesty, and pride over humility. Bravo, you may have lost peace for a while, but they lost the ability to truly rest. You may have lost trust in them, but they lost the privilege of being trusted by someone as sincere as you. You may have lost moments of happiness, but they lost the chance to experience genuine love, loyalty, and connection, the kind only a pure-hearted person can offer. Pain made you believe that you were robbed, but life reveals that they were the ones who forfeited something far more valuable. A person who harms a gentle soul does not walk away victorious. They walk away diminished, even if they don't feel it immediately. They damage something inside themselves each time they intentionally wound someone else. Every cruel act chips away at their integrity, their humanity, their sense of self. While you wrestled with heartbreak, they unknowingly set in motion the slow erosion of their own inner world. What they took from you was temporary. What they lost in themselves was lasting. When they lied to you, it felt like you lost truth. But the real loss was theirs. They lost credibility. When they manipulated you, it felt like you lost control. But the real loss was theirs. They lost the ability to relate with sincerity. When they abandoned you, it felt like you lost companionship. But the real loss was theirs. They lost someone who would have stood by them with loyalty and compassion. Every loss you thought was yours was, in reality, an illusion created by the immediacy of pain. Pain blurs perspective. It magnifies your wounds and minimizes theirs. You assume they walked away unaffected, their life untouched by what they did. But cruelty always leaves a trace on the one who commits it. They may smile, but the smile is unsteady. They may boast, but the confidence is hollow. They may appear victorious, but deep inside their spirit knows what it has done. The human heart is not designed to hurt others without consequence. It always remembers, even when the mind tries to forget. As you heal, you regain everything you thought was gone. Your peace returns in deeper waves. Your strength grows in places that once felt shattered. Your resilience becomes a quiet force shaped by the storms you survived. You rise with a clearer mind, a softer heart, a stronger spirit. But their loss does not recover so easily. The damage they inflicted on themselves through harming you leaves a mark that healing cannot erase without transformation. And transformation rarely visits hearts that refuse to acknowledge their own wrongdoing. The real loss belongs to them, because they lost access to a version of you that was willing to give, love, trust, and stand beside them. They lost the opportunity to experience a relationship built on integrity, sincerity, and loyalty. They lost the chance to grow through your kindness, to mature through your patience, to be softened by your gentleness. They threw away something rare, something precious, something they may spend years searching for again, not realizing it was already in their hands. And in the quiet moments of their life, when the noise fades and their distractions fail, they will feel the weight of that loss. Not because you wished it upon them, but because life always reveals the truth. They will look around and see that the emptiness they tried to fill by hurting others has only grown deeper. They will realize that what they thought was power was actually weakness. What they thought was victory was actually defeat. What they thought they destroyed in you was actually what they destroyed in themselves. The loss they carry cannot be seen from the outside. It is an ache in the soul, a fracture in the conscience, a lingering awareness that something valuable slipped away because they mishandled it. And that loss, the one they created through their own actions, remains long after your heart has healed. It is theirs to bear, not yours. You were never the one who lost. You were the one who survived, grew, and rose. They were the ones who forfeited everything that truly mattered. Harming a pure soul is never a small act, even if the person doing it treats it lightly. When someone wounds a heart that carries sincerity, compassion, and innocence, they set in motion consequences they cannot foresee. They may believe they acted with boldness, confidence, or even righteousness, but harming someone who meant no harm to them carries a cost that life eventually demands. It is not a cost paid in dramatic punishments or visible disasters, though sometimes those appear. It is a cost paid quietly, deeply, and continuously in the places where peace should reside. Those who hurt pure-hearted people often assume that softness equals helplessness. They mistake gentleness for naivety, humility for weakness, and sincerity for vulnerability. They believe they can act without consequences because the pure soul does not retaliate, does not fight dirty, does not seek revenge. But this misunderstanding becomes their undoing. The innocence they wounded is the very mirror that reflects back to them the truth they try to escape about themselves. When they harmed you, they didn't simply hurt another person, they injured their own ability to feel genuine peace. A heart that inflicts pain intentionally cannot remain whole. It fractures in ways that are invisible to others but undeniable within. Every act of cruelty leaves a mark, not on the victim, but on the one who chose cruelty. They lose sleep not because you haunt them, but because their conscience does. Even the most arrogant soul cannot silence its own internal whisper forever. They lose respect, not just from others, but from themselves. A person can lie to the world about who they are, but they cannot lie to the quiet voice inside that remembers every intentional wound they inflicted. Over time, this voice grows louder. It questions them at night, confronts them in moments of stillness, and exposes them in situations where their facade begins to slip. They become prisoners of their own actions, no matter how loudly they pretend otherwise. They lose peace because peace cannot coexist with cruelty. A heart that damages another heart forfeits its own rest. A mind that plots harm cannot find calm. They begin to live in a constant state of guarding themselves, fearing exposure, sensing that something is missing, something is wrong, something is unraveling. Peace cannot live in a place where compassion has been exiled. And without peace, even the most successful life feels impoverished. They lose the illusion of control they once believed they possessed. When they hurt you, it gave them a temporary feeling of power, a momentary sense that they were winning, dominating, or proving something. But control obtained through cruelty is fragile. It slips through their fingers the moment life stops cooperating with their narrative. The relationships they once manipulated begin to resist. The lies they told begin to conflict. The people they influenced begin to see truths they once ignored. Control, when stolen rather than earned, always dissolves into chaos. The cost of harming a pure soul also reveals itself in loneliness, not necessarily isolation from people, but a loneliness of the heart, the deeper kind. The one that comes from being surrounded by others but unable to feel connected. When a person mistreats someone who loved them sincerely, they lose access to genuine affection. They may have many people around them, but none who truly know them, none who truly care, none who offer a love as deep or as earnest as the one they discarded. This loneliness does not appear suddenly. It seeps in slowly. It enters as a vague dissatisfaction, a persistent emptiness, a restlessness they cannot explain. They fill their life with noise, friends, entertainment, new relationships, distractions, but the ache remains. Because what they truly lost was not someone who depended on them, but someone who cared for them with purity. That is a rare gift, one life does not hand out freely. Most painful of all, they lose the opportunity for redemption that comes from being loved by someone good. A pure heart has the power to soften rough edges, heal hidden wounds, and inspire someone to grow into a better version of themselves. When they harmed you, they lost the chance to become better through your presence. They lost the possibility of transformation. They lost the blessing of being loved by someone whose kindness could have saved them from the darker parts of themselves. Harming a pure soul is not an act without consequences. It is the beginning of a slow unraveling. They lose peace, respect, connection, and the very things that bring meaning to life. And while they struggle under the weight of these losses, you rediscover your worth, your strength, and your identity. Their cost becomes their burden, and your healing becomes your triumph. Life has a quiet way of revealing truth, not with noise or spectacle, but with a slow and steady unraveling. When someone builds their world on dishonesty, manipulation, or false appearances, that world can look impressive for a while. It can seem solid, admired, even envied, but anything not rooted in truth carries a hidden fragility. It may stand tall for a season, but time has a way of peeling back every layer until what remains is the bare, undeniable reality. This is why the people who hurt you eventually find their own masks slipping. They cannot hide behind their crafted stories forever. Life exposes what was never sincere. The relationships they once controlled begin to shift. Those who believed their lies start to notice inconsistencies, small cracks in the narrative, subtle moments where the truth contradicts what they claimed. At first, these cracks seem insignificant, just small slips, but small slips become patterns. Patterns become suspicions, and suspicions become revelations. The image they projected so confidently starts to dissolve, not because someone attacked it, but because it was never supported by honesty to begin with. People who build their identity on falsehood constantly fight against the natural pull of truth. They must maintain a story, manipulate perceptions, and guard themselves against exposure. This effort is exhausting. Every day becomes a performance, a rehearsal of fabricated emotions, a maintenance of illusions that grow heavier with time. They walk through life carrying a weight that an honest heart never has to bear. In the end, the burden becomes too great. Even the strongest pretenders cannot hold their mask forever. Their confidence begins to erode first. Confidence built on deception is brittle. It looks bold but shatters easily. When confronted with even the smallest challenge, they begin to doubt themselves. Their voice loses its steadiness. Their certainty becomes shaky. A person who relies on lies cannot trust anyone, not even themselves. Their inner world becomes filled with fear, fear of being exposed, fear of losing control, fear of the truth catching up to them, and fear, once planted, grows roots that spread through every part of their life. The stories they crafted so carefully begin to unravel in ways they cannot control. A lie spoken to one person contradicts a lie spoken to another. A false impression given last month clashes with the image they try to maintain today. People begin to connect dots, sometimes quietly, sometimes openly. Life does not need to punish them. The truth simply rises through the cracks like light breaking through a closed curtain. Once truth enters, deception cannot survive. They start losing support from others. Because false relationships are not relationships, they are transactions. The moment people stop benefiting from their behavior or begin seeing through their act, they withdraw. The admiration they once received fades, the influence they relied on weakens, the validation they fed on disappears. They are left standing alone with the reality they tried so desperately to avoid. What is more striking is how their own conscience begins to rebel. Even those who outwardly deny their wrongdoing cannot silence the inner voice that knows what they have done. That voice may be quiet, but it is persistent. It questions them in moments of solitude, interrupts them in the middle of laughter, disturbs their sleep, and reminds them of every wound they caused. Their inner world becomes a battlefield of avoidance and guilt, where truth slowly pushes through every wall they built to keep it hidden. The success they once flaunted feels less satisfying because deep inside they know it was achieved through manipulation. The friendships they used for advantage start to crumble because people grow tired of being misled. The reputation they relied on becomes stained by the very behaviors they used to maintain it. Life exposes not through cruelty, but through natural consequence. What was never real cannot remain intact. And while their world unravels, you begin to see clearly that none of what they flaunted was ever solid. The truth that emerges is not meant to vindicate you. It simply demonstrates that authenticity endures while pretense collapses. Everything they used to elevate themselves, everything they constructed to appear powerful, begins to fall apart piece by piece, revealing the emptiness beneath the surface. Their false strength dissolves, and all that remains is the truth they tried so hard to bury. Your suffering was never meaningless. It may have felt unbearable at times, like a weight on your chest that made breathing difficult, like a shadow that followed you even in moments that should have been peaceful. But pain, when handled with sincerity, becomes the ground where resilience takes root. You may not have seen it while you were breaking, but something within you was being shaped. Slowly, quietly, and profoundly. Every moment you endured without retaliating. Every tear you shed without bitterness. Every night you spent wrestling with questions that had no answers was strengthening a part of you that would one day rise with unmistakable power. Pain has a way of refining a person. It removes illusions, sharpens awareness, and deepens the heart's capacity to feel. The hurt they caused did not weaken you. It stripped away what was superficial and revealed what was indestructible. You discovered sensitivities you didn't know you had, and strengths you didn't know were possible. While they underestimated your endurance, life was gently crafting a resilience that could not be shaken by betrayal, misjudgment, or cruelty. There were moments when you felt small, insignificant, and forgotten. Moments when you questioned your own worth because of how someone else treated you. But within those moments, a different truth was quietly forming. You were learning to stand alone. You were learning to breathe without validation. You were learning to walk forward with cracks in your soul and still find a way to remain intact. The strength you gained was not loud or dramatic. It was subtle, like roots growing beneath the surface, hidden but unmovable. The resilience you carry now did not develop in comfort. It grew in the places where you were stretched the thinnest. It grew in the silence after someone walked away. It grew in the space left behind by broken promises. It grew in the emptiness that followed betrayal. Pain was the soil, yes, but healing was the seed, and you allowed that seed to grow, even when the world around you felt unkind. You did not let bitterness harden your heart. You kept your humanity intact, even when others could not see it or appreciate it. And that resilience has become your quiet power. It is the strength that rises in your voice when you speak the truth without fear. It is the calmness you carry in situations that once caused you anxiety. It is the way you now recognize red flags that you once ignored. It is the compassion you show others who are hurting because you know what it means to suffer in silence. Your pain became the very thing that taught you to see through darkness and walk toward the light with intention. While they remained the same, driven by arrogance, manipulation, or pride, your suffering was shaping you into someone wiser. They remained shallow, you grew deeper. They repeated the same patterns, you broke them. They mistook your tears for weakness, but tears are often the washing of the soul, preparing it for clarity. They thought they were destroying you, but all they were doing was revealing the strength that already lived inside you. You did not fall apart, you transformed. And the transformation shows in the way you carry yourself now. There is a softness in you that is not naive but mature, a caution that is not fearful but discerning, a peace that is not passive but earned. People may not see the journey behind your eyes, but the way you stand now is different, more grounded, more aware, more whole. Your resilience is not just something you possess, it has become a part of your identity. Your suffering turned you into someone who sees truth more clearly, who loves more intentionally, who forgives without forgetting the lessons learned. It taught you boundaries. It taught you self-respect. It taught you that survival is not simply about enduring pain, but about allowing pain to refine your character. What they did to break you became the very force that rebuilt you. The damage they caused became the doorway through which your strength entered. You emerged with resilience, not because they were powerful enough to destroy you, but because you were strong enough to grow through everything they tried to use against you. Their cruelty shaped your strength. Their betrayal formed your wisdom. Their actions became the soil in which your endurance bloomed. And now, the resilience you gained stands as proof that no one can destroy what life intends to rebuild. Stronger. There comes a moment when you realize that life has been quietly rearranging everything in your favor, even while you were hurting. The dignity you thought you lost begins to return, not because someone apologized or tried to fix what they broke, but because truth has a way of lifting those who remain honest through their suffering. As life restores you, it exposes the one who hurt you, not through dramatic punishment, but through the simple revealing of who they truly are without their illusions. While your heart regains its strength, theirs begins to unravel under the weight of their own choices. What makes this shift so profound is that it happens slowly, almost invisibly at first. You start to notice small changes in yourself. Your voice becomes steadier, your presence becomes calmer, your spirit becomes clearer. You begin to walk with a certain quiet confidence that cannot be faked because it was forged in the hardest seasons of your life. Your healing becomes your elevation. Your clarity becomes your protection. And the dignity they stripped from you starts flowing back like water returning to a riverbed. Meanwhile, the one who harmed you begins experiencing the opposite. Their own choices catch up with them, revealing their inner condition in ways they cannot hide. The arrogance they once displayed so proudly loses its sharpness. They begin to stumble in places where they used to stand tall. The relationships they manipulated start slipping from their hands. The peace they pretended to have becomes harder for them to mimic. They are left face to face with the truth they tried so hard to bury. For a long time you may have wondered why you had to suffer so deeply while they seemed unaffected. But life has its own rhythm of justice. It does not rush. It does not shout. It does not announce itself. It simply unfolds. And as it unfolds, it separates authenticity from illusion. It strengthens those who lived with sincerity and weakens those who built their identity on deception. You begin to rise, not because someone lifted you, but because nothing can hold down a soul rooted in truth. Their downfall is not always visible to the world, but it is always felt by them. They carry a heaviness inside that keeps growing, a pressure that tightens around the parts of them that once felt invincible. They begin losing the very things they used to hurt you: respect, influence, relationships, peace. What they took for granted becomes scarce. What they misused becomes unavailable. What they weaponized becomes their own burden. The dignity they tried to strip from you is restored to you, while the stability they once flaunted begins to crumble beneath them. And in that contrast, you finally understand something essential. What you gained in suffering is far greater than what you lost. You gained wisdom, the kind that cannot be taught, only lived. You gained discernment, the ability to recognize intentions, read behavior, and protect your heart from future harm. You gained strength, not the loud kind, but the kind that stands silently even in storms. You gained depth, an inner richness that pain carved out in you. They, on the other hand, face the emptiness they created. They face the loneliness that grows when someone mistreats the very people who cared for them. They face the silence that comes when trust has been broken too many times. They face the mirror that reflects their character without the filters they once relied upon. Their downfall is not your victory. It is simply the consequence of their own choices. And your rise is not their loss. It is the natural result of choosing truth, even when truth costs you dearly. As you keep healing, you will notice something remarkable. You no longer think about proving anything to them. You no longer carry the weight of their actions. You no longer need their recognition or regret. Your dignity becomes self-sustaining. It becomes grounded in who you are, not in how someone treated you. This is the quiet transformation that life gives to those who endured suffering without losing themselves. You rise because truth is on your side. They fall because truth no longer supports the world they built. You become whole because you allowed pain to teach you. They become restless because they refused to learn from their own cruelty. The dignity they tried to take from you returns, stronger than before, while the illusions they lived behind dissolve, revealing their true condition. In the end, you walk forward free, while they walk forward carrying the weight of everything they once used to hurt you. In the end, what happened to you was never the end of your story. It was the beginning of your becoming. You walked through pain that should have broken you, yet it shaped you instead. You endured wounds that could have made you bitter, yet they deepened your compassion. You faced betrayal that could have hardened your heart, yet it refined your discernment. And while you rose quietly, steadily, and with a dignity no one could take away, the one who hurt you was left to face the truth they had long escaped. Everything they used to harm you slipped from their hands, because nothing built on cruelty can be carried forever. You did not need revenge. You did not need to prove anything. Your healing became the proof. Your strength became the answer. Your endurance became the justice. Let them face what they created. Let life handle what you never could. You are stepping into a chapter where pain no longer defines you, and their actions no longer diminish you. You are rising with a clarity they can never undo, while they are left to confront the emptiness they carved with their own hands. Your story continues with strength. Theirs continues with consequence, and nothing they did can change the truth of who you became through it all.